Despite the scandals, financial struggles, and COVID-19, all the restaurants on this list still exist in some form. Let's take a deeper look at the scandals that have rocked the world of buffet chain restaurants. Chi-Chi's 2003 hepatitis A outbreak was one of the biggest restaurant scandals ever. That fall, over 650 people who ate at a Pennsylvania Chi-Chi's Mexican buffet, or who were connected to people who ate there, ended up sick. In total, 9,000 people received immune globulin injections to stave off the infection. However, the real tragedy was that 4 people died, and 1 person needed a liver transplant. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, you can get hepatitis A from consuming food with even a tiny amount of the virus in it. It's also easily spread via close contact with someone carrying the virus. At Chi-Chi's, the culprit was raw green onions that the chain had sourced from Mexico. Even before the outbreak, Chi-Chi's was struggling and had recently filed for bankruptcy. Afterward, the court ordered the company to pay more than $40 million in damages to settle hundreds of victim lawsuits. Chi-Chi's never recovered from the incident, and the only remaining location is in Vienna, Austria. In July 2013, an employee at the Golden Corral in Port Orange, Florida, posted a YouTube video showing what the chain did when a food safety inspector showed up for a surprise inspection. Brandon Huber's video shows a rolling rack full of trays of raw hamburger patties and baby back ribs that the manager asked employees to take outside out of the inspector's sight.
This is what my company likes to do to get ready for inspection. They like to put their food by the dumpster.
It's a sweltering summer day, and although the rack is covered with a heavy plastic sheet, it's sitting beside the trash bin, and flies are circling. Removing possibly tainted meat during an inspection is bad enough.
After the inspectors left, they wheeled it back into the restaurant, and they tried to put it back into the coolers. They wanted me to cook it, and I refused to.
Eric Holm, the owner of the Golden Corral franchise in question, issued an official statement saying that all of the meat from the video was destroyed. He added that Huber helped with the disposal process, which was done before he released the incriminating video. The manager who asked employees to remove the meat was fired. But no matter what happened, customers told News 6 that they didn't want to eat at Golden Corral if there was a chance of getting unsafe food. In 1995, 2 fired waitresses filed a civil suit against the Pennsylvania Haas's Steak and Sea House, claiming it was an aggressive and uncomfortable work environment. One claim involved an employee mutilating, skewering, and deep frying a Barbie doll in what the waitresses said was a satanic ritual. Even so, employees continued to use the grease to fry food for another week, according to the lawsuit. The servers also claimed that male employees touched them inappropriately, told sexually explicit stories, made overt sexual remarks, and played music with explicit sexual content to make them uncomfortable. After the 2 complained to management, they were retaliated against. They were assigned the least desirable shifts when the restaurant didn't have many customers, and were given bad food to serve to customers, undercooked or containing bugs, for example, both of which cut into their ability to earn tips. After they were fired, both servers had trouble getting hired elsewhere because Haas's employees gave them bad references. It sounds horrible, but federal jurors ultimately rejected the claims at a 1998 trial, siding instead with the restaurant. Over the years, we've gotten used to handing over our credit cards when we pay for something, but when you let your card out of your sight, you put yourself at risk for what happened at a Sheridan, Colorado HuHot. In 2014, police reported arresting Michael Stevens for credit card skimming at the HuHot Mongolian barbecue grill where he worked. He might have gotten away with it for longer if he hadn't bragged to a fellow employee about what he was doing and showed her his skimming machine. She didn't find it amusing and promptly reported the crime. When the police investigated, they found gift cards with the card skimmer. Rather than leave a telltale trail of purchases made with stolen card numbers, Stevens used the numbers to purchase gift cards, then used the gift cards in place of cash to make purchases. Overall, the FBI estimates that card skimming thieves steal $1 billion per year, and a lot of these thefts happen without releasing your card to anyone. Instead, Thieves attach a skimmer device on top of a legitimate card reader at a gas pump or ATM terminal.
Police say a man distracts the store clerk at the register while another guy quickly places a skimming device over the payment pad.
So be careful. These days, you don't even have to hand over your card to end up the victim of a skimming scheme. Ryan's Family Steakhouse has a history of workplace discrimination lawsuits. In 2000, a Black employee named Dwayne Campbell alleged that he was passed over for a promotion in favor of a lower-ranked white employee. In a 2006 case, another Black employee, Elvis Jenkins, said he was fired for wearing jeans to work instead of the required work pants, an infraction that white employees regularly got away with. He also alleged retaliation after his brother made a racial discrimination complaint against Ryan's as a customer.
We've had issues with people like you guys walking out before paying.
Both cases were eventually dismissed by the courts. But in 2009, claims by several Ryan's employees who alleged sexual and racial discrimination were upheld. 7 employees in Kentucky collectively received $500,000 in a settlement through an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission consent decree after filing a class action lawsuit. If you were a female employee, a Black employee, or a white employee associated with Black employees, other workers at Ryan's made your life miserable. Black employees were regularly subjected to racial hostilities and fired. Friends of Black employees were called race traitors and worse, and women were subjected to sexual harassment of all sorts. If you visited a Ryan's buffet after the decree, you may have seen a court-ordered notice on display stating that employees would no longer be engaging in sexual and racial harassment and that they wouldn't be retaliating against anyone who reported problems. You probably haven't seen many old country buffets lately, which could be related to its reputation for multiple salmonella outbreaks. In 2010, a man named Christopher Gage suffered severe side effects from salmonella poisoning that were traced to his visit to an old country buffet in Wyoming. The salmonella turned into sepsis, and his kidneys failed, among other symptoms. Gage ended up with debilitating injuries related to digestion, mobility, and brain function. Ultimately, he was awarded an $11.4 million judgment, though was helped by the fact that the restaurant had been written up for 18 health code infractions just one day before Gage ate there. In 2014, salmonella struck again at an old country buffet in Minnesota. This time, it sickened 36 people over several days, one of whom ended up in the hospital. Ultimately, the outbreak source turned out to be dinner rolls, which were probably contaminated with salmonella from raw chicken in the kitchen.
Welcome. Are you ready to die?
In 2016, Old Country Buffet filed for its 3rd bankruptcy after a decline in sales, which was likely due to the ick factor of eating at a buffet that served up salmonella. According to court filings, Iowa Pizza Ranch co-owner Lawrence Vander Esch told some of his teenage employees that he would pay them for semen samples for scientific research. Only there was a catch. To ensure that there was no air in the sample, the teens would need to collect it in a condom, with Vander Esch's help. He then placed the samples on ice to reinforce his story, and one of the young men even traveled with Vander Esch to the University of Iowa hospitals where he claimed to be delivering a sample. Of course, it was all a ruse. During the criminal investigation, more than a dozen former employees alleged similar abuse by the businessman over a 20-year period. Vander Esch pleaded guilty in 2001 to 4 counts of third-degree sexual abuse. He then appealed his conviction, claiming he wasn't at fault because he got permission from each of his victims, even if the teens granted that permission under false pretenses. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but was released after 5 years for good behavior. In 2006, a judge vacated his convictions, citing a change in the law by the Iowa Supreme Court. If you're not familiar with check kiting, it involves writing bad checks from one bank account to increase the size of another bank account. If you have enough accounts, you could artificially inflate the size of each one so that it seems like you have real money, until someone catches onto your scheme. Fred Buxom, owned 15 Ponderosa Steakhouses when he was caught in what was possibly the biggest check-kiting scheme ever to hit northern Ohio. He was writing checks from each of his 15 Ponderosa Steakhouse accounts to pass around non-existent cash totaling about $824 million. The scheme lasted for 21 months before First Merit Bank realized it was losing millions. Over 44,000 checks were involved, with Buxom cashing more than $4 million in checks a day.
Ladies and gentlemen, this bank has just been robbed.
Buxom pleaded guilty in 2008 and ended up with a 33-month prison sentence. 9 of his 15 restaurants closed. You can still find Ponderosa Steakhouses in the Midwest and the Central Atlantic states, and one outlier in Florida, but they don't have the presence they once did. You know a scandal is bad when there's a book written about it. The Black O, Racism and Redemption in an American Corporate Empire by Steve Watkins tells the story of Shoney's history of racial discrimination. The Black O, according to a summary of the book, refers to the practice the company had of filling in the O in Shoney's unemployment applications to indicate that it belonged to a minority and should be filed in the trash can. A 1989 complaint in Pensacola, Florida, referenced evidence against 211 managers and other top figures who followed these and other discriminatory practices. Black employees talked about working for the chain for years without promotions, being forced to work out of sight in the kitchen, or being fired for racially related reasons. Ultimately, about 40,000 employees, former employees, and job applicants benefited from the $105 million settlement. It was a landmark win in the fight against racism in restaurants. Nothing ruins your appetite for a restaurant buffet like knowing that a mass murder took place there. The slayings at an Oklahoma City Sirloin Stockade happened in 1978, but the memory has lingered, especially because mass murders were so rare at that time. 4 of the 6 employees killed were teenagers between the ages of 15 and 17. That night, Roger Dale Stafford, his wife, Verna Mae Stafford, and his brother, Harold Stafford, ordered the workers into the meat freezer, where they shot them in the head at close range, killing them all.
5 left dead in the freezer, the 6th would die at the hospital, and the killers, they had vanished.
Police initially had no suspects. The trio would likely have gotten away with the crime if Roger Stafford hadn't drunk-dialed the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation in 1979 to accuse his brother and then estranged wife of being responsible. Harold Stafford had died in a motorcycle accident a week after the murders. It turned out that the gun they used at Sirloin Stockade was the same one they used to kill a family of 3 in Purcell, Oklahoma, 24 days earlier. Ultimately, Roger Stafford was sentenced to death, while Verna Stafford got 2 consecutive life sentences. There is a true crime book about the killings called Sirloin Stockade Slaughter: Murder on the Run. In the summer of 2000, an E. coli outbreak at 2 Sizzler restaurants in Wisconsin sickened hundreds of people, hospitalized dozens, and ultimately claimed the life of a 3-year-old girl. 4 people, including the toddler who died, contracted hemolytic uremic syndrome, which destroys red blood cells and causes the kidneys to shut down. When officials tested the E. coli from the 2 restaurants, they were genetically related, which means that the bacteria found at both locations came from the same source. Ultimately, officials traced the source to raw taco meat and raw sirloin tri-tips, which had contaminated items on the buffet salad bar. One of the prime culprits seemed to be the watermelon, which is ever so tempting for young buffet goers.